It started like any other day at Oakwood High. I shuffled through the double doors, greeted by the usual cacophony of teenage chatter, lockers slamming, and the occasional snippet of pop music from someone's phone. I had just finished grabbing my books from my locker when the PA system crackled to life. "Attention all students and faculty, this is Principal Edwards. We are now entering a lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Please follow all lockdown procedures immediately." A hush fell over the hallways. My heart skipped a beat. We had practiced lockdown drills before, but hearing those words, "This is not a drill," sent a cold shiver down my spine. I quickly ducked into the nearest classroom, room 204, Mr. Davis's history class. He was already ushering the last few students inside, his face pale and tense. "All right, everyone, under the desks. Move quickly and stay silent," Mr. Davis instructed, his voice steady but low. We scrambled to obey, hearts pounding, breaths shallow. The silence was deafening. I squeezed under a desk at the back, next to Jenny, a sophomore I barely knew. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. I reached over and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, trying to mask my own terror. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The only sounds were the occasional whisper of a stifled sob and the ticking of the wall clock. Every creak and groan of the building felt amplified, like a sinister presence lurking just out of sight. Mr. Davis sat against the door, his eyes locked on the small window set in the upper half of the door, watching for any sign of movement. We all flinched when a loud bang echoed down the hallway. It was followed by another, then another, like heavy footsteps. Someone in the room whimpered, and Mr. Davis shushed them urgently, putting a finger to his lips. We sat there, paralyzed with fear, as the noises grew closer. The footsteps stopped outside our door, and I could see the shadow of someone standing there through the gap at the bottom of the door. The doorknob rattled. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever was on the other side tried the handle again, harder this time. Then, silence. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow moved away, and the footsteps receded down the hallway. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my muscles aching from tension. We stayed huddled under our desks for what must have been hours, though it was impossible to tell time accurately. Eventually, the PA system crackled to life again, and Principal Edwards's voice, shaky and strained, came through. "Attention all students and faculty. The immediate threat has passed, but the school remains on lockdown. Do not leave your classrooms until instructed. Emergency services are on their way." Mr. Davis visibly relaxed, though he still looked on edge. We all slowly emerged from under our desks, stretching our cramped limbs. Jenny was still shaking, so I stayed close to her, offering what little comfort I could. Mr. Davis walked over to the window and peeked through the blinds. The parking lot outside was empty, save for a few scattered cars. No police lights, no ambulances. It struck me as odd, considering the announcement. A loud crash from the hallway made us all jump. Mr. Davis motioned for us to stay quiet and moved toward the door, peering through the small window again. "Stay here," he whispered, as he unlocked the door and slipped out into the hallway. We watched him go, a sense of dread settling over us. Minutes ticked by, and he didn't return. The tension in the room was palpable. "I think we should go look for him," whispered Tommy, a junior known for his bravado. "He could be in trouble." "No way," hissed Lisa, a senior who always sat in the front row. "We need to stay put like we were told." The debate was cut short by a scream. It was unmistakably Mr. Davis. Without thinking, I grabbed the door handle and pulled it open, ignoring the protests of my classmates. Tommy followed, along with a few others, but most stayed behind, fear rooting them in place. The hallway was eerily silent, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow on the linoleum floor. We crept forward, sticking close to the walls. The scream had come from further down the hall, near the science labs. We found Mr. Davis lying in a pool of blood just outside room 307. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, his throat slashed. I gagged, the metallic smell of blood filling my nostrils. Tommy cursed under his breath, and Lisa, who had eventually joined us, turned away, retching. "What the hell happened here?" Tommy muttered, his bravado gone, replaced by sheer terror. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to find help." We moved quickly but cautiously, heading towards the main entrance. As we passed by the other classrooms, we could see students and teachers peeking out, their faces masks of fear and confusion. I wanted to tell them to stay put, to keep safe, but we had to keep moving. The main doors were just ahead when we saw him. A man, dressed in dark clothes, holding a large knife. He was standing in front of the doors, blocking our exit. His eyes locked onto ours, and a slow, sinister smile spread across his face. We froze, panic gripping us. He started to walk towards us, his movements deliberate and menacing. We turned and ran back the way we came, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. We ducked into the nearest classroom, slamming the door shut behind us. It was Mr. Jacobs' chemistry lab, filled with tall counters and various equipment. We barricaded the door with a heavy lab table, our hands shaking. "We need to find a way out," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "There's a window at the back," Tommy said, pointing. "We can break it and climb out." We moved quickly, grabbing a stool to smash the window. The sound of shattering glass was deafening, but it was our only chance. One by one, we climbed through the opening, careful to avoid the jagged edges. As I climbed out, I glanced back and saw the man at the door, trying to force it open. Our makeshift barricade wouldn't hold for long. We dropped to the ground outside and ran towards the parking lot, our legs burning with exertion. The parking lot was still empty, no sign of help. We headed for the tree line at the edge of the school grounds, hoping to find safety in the dense woods. Behind us, the sound of the door finally giving way sent a fresh wave of panic through us. We plunged into the woods, the underbrush scratching at our legs and arms. The thick canopy overhead cast eerie shadows, making it hard to see where we were going. We could still hear the man behind us, crashing through the undergrowth. "Keep going," I urged, though my own legs felt like they were about to give out. We stumbled through the woods, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but we didn't dare stop. Eventually, we reached a small clearing and collapsed to the ground, utterly spent. "I think we lost him," Tommy panted, though his eyes were still wide with fear. "We need to call for help," Lisa said, pulling out her phone. She frowned. "No signal." "Great," I muttered, looking around. "Now what?" Before anyone could answer, we heard a rustling in the bushes. We tensed, ready to bolt again, but it was Jenny, the girl from Mr. Davis's class. She had followed us, her face pale and streaked with tears. "I couldn't stay there," she whispered. I was too scared. "It's okay," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "We're safer together." We huddled in the clearing, too exhausted to move but too terrified to rest. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. We listened for any signs of pursuit, but the woods were eerily silent. After what felt like hours, we decided we couldn't stay in the woods forever. We needed to find help. Reluctantly, we made our way back towards the school, sticking to the shadows and moving as quietly as possible. When we reached the edge of the woods, we could see the school building, dark and foreboding. There were still no signs of police or emergency services. It didn't make sense. Why hadn't anyone come? We crept back inside, our nerves on edge. The hallways were still and silent, the air thick with tension. We made our way to the principal's office, hoping to find answers. The door was ajar, and we pushed it open cautiously. Principal Edwards was there, slumped over his desk, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes stared blankly at us, a look of horror frozen on his face. I felt bile rise in my throat, and Jenny let out a small sob. "What the hell is going on?" Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why isn't anyone here? Where are the police?" I shook my head, at a loss for words. The sight of Principal Edwards, lifeless and bloody, was too much to process. I scanned the room, hoping for some clue, some explanation. The phone on his desk was off the hook, the line dead. Papers were scattered everywhere, and a laptop was open, its screen frozen on an emergency alert. "We need to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "This place isn't safe." "But where do we go?" Jenny asked, her voice small and frightened. "The gym," I suggested, an idea forming. "It has a back door that leads to the field. Maybe we can find a way out through there." We moved cautiously through the hallways, the oppressive silence weighing heavily on us. As we approached the gym, the air grew colder, and an inexplicable sense of dread settled over us. The gym doors were slightly ajar, a faint light spilling out. We slipped inside, the vast space eerily empty. The bleachers loomed like silent sentinels, and the sound of our footsteps echoed unnervingly. We headed towards the back door, our hope hinging on this one last escape route. Just as we reached the door, it swung open violently, and the man with the knife stood there, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. We froze, paralyzed by fear. He stepped forward, and I could see the blood on his hands, glistening in the dim light. "No more running," he said, his voice a sinister whisper. "It's time to end this." The man lunged at us, knife raised. We scattered, the fight-or-flight instinct kicking in. Tommy grabbed a nearby basketball and hurled it at the man, hitting him in the chest. It barely slowed him down, but it gave us a moment to react. "Over here!" I shouted, grabbing Jenny's hand and pulling her towards the bleachers. We scrambled up the steps, hoping to put some distance between us and the attacker. Lisa and Tommy followed, their eyes wide with fear. The man was relentless, climbing the bleachers with a chilling calmness. We reached the top, trapped with nowhere to go. I scanned the gym, desperate for a solution. Then I saw it, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. "Tommy, grab that extinguisher!" I yelled, pointing. Tommy darted over, yanking the extinguisher from its bracket. He turned, aiming it at the man, and squeezed the handle. A cloud of white foam erupted, hitting the man square in the face. He stumbled, blinded and coughing. "Now!" I shouted. "Run!" We clambered down the bleachers, racing towards the locker rooms. The man's curses echoed behind us, but we didn't look back. We burst into the boys' locker room, slamming the door shut and wedging a bench against it. "That won't hold for long," Lisa panted, leaning against the wall. "There's a window in the shower area," I said, remembering the layout from gym class. "We can climb out there." We hurried to the shower area, finding the small window high on the wall. Tommy boosted Jenny up, and she wriggled through, dropping to the ground outside. Lisa went next, then me. As I hit the ground, I turned to help Tommy, but he was already halfway through. Just as he was about to drop down, the door to the locker room burst open, the man barreling through. He lunged at Tommy, grabbing his leg. Tommy kicked out, struggling to free himself, and I grabbed his arms, pulling with all my strength. With a final, desperate effort, Tommy slipped through the window, landing heavily beside us. We took off running again, heading for the football field. The open expanse seemed both a blessing and a curse, nowhere to hide, but also nowhere for the man to sneak up on us. We reached the field, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The lights of the school seemed distant and foreboding, the silence oppressive. We had no idea where the man was, but we couldn't stop moving. "Look," Lisa said, pointing towards the far end of the field. There, glinting in the moonlight, was a parked police car. Relief flooded through me. Maybe the authorities had finally arrived. We sprinted towards the car, hope lending us speed. As we got closer, we saw the officer inside, slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving. My heart sank. No, not again. I reached the car first, yanking the door open. The officer was unconscious, but alive, a gash on his forehead. The radio was crackling with static, and I grabbed the handset, trying to call for help. "Hello, is anyone there? We're at Oakwood High, we need immediate assistance. There's a man with a knife, he's killed people. Please, send help." The static continued for a moment, then a voice crackled through. "This is dispatch. Hold tight, units are en route." I dropped the handset, relief mingling with fear. "Help is coming," I said, turning to the others. "We just need to hold on a little longer." We gathered around the car, keeping a wary eye on the school building. The minutes ticked by, agonizingly slow. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise amplified by our fear. Finally, the wail of sirens broke the silence. Red and blue lights flashed as police cars and ambulances poured into the parking lot. Officers swarmed the area, weapons drawn, moving towards the school. An officer approached us, his face stern but reassuring. "Are you all right?" "We're alive," I said, my voice shaking. "But there are others inside. And the man, he's still in there." The officer nodded, speaking into his radio. "We've got survivors here. Send medical assistance." Paramedics arrived, checking us over and treating our minor injuries. The police moved into the school, their radios crackling with updates. We clung to each other, exhausted and terrified, but finally safe. The next few hours were a blur of questions, medical checks, and comforting embraces from our families. The police eventually found the man hiding in one of the classrooms, and he was taken into custody without further incident. He was identified as a former student, someone who had been expelled years ago and harbored a grudge against the school. As the sun rose, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, we sat together, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cocoa provided by the paramedics. The reality of what we had survived began to sink in, the adrenaline giving way to exhaustion and a deep, bone-chilling fear. "Why did this happen?" Jenny asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted, staring at the horizon. "But we made it. We're alive. And that counts for something." In the days that followed, the school remained closed, the halls silent and empty. Counselors were brought in to help us process the trauma, and the community rallied around us, offering support and kindness. We would never forget the terror of that night, the way it had changed us. But we also learned about resilience, about the strength we didn't know we had. We had faced the darkness and come out the other side, forever altered but unbroken. And as we slowly returned to our routines, we carried with us a newfound appreciation for life, for the fragile beauty of each day. The halls of Oakwood High would eventually fill with laughter and learning again, but the memory of that night would always linger, a silent reminder of our shared ordeal and our collective strength. In the end, we learned that even in the face of unimaginable horror, we could find the courage to survive, to support each other, and to reclaim our lives. And that was a lesson that would stay with us forever.